Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the series. Today, we're going to be taking a look at Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban, taking a look at some of the color characteristics and some insights from the cinematographer, as well as from the director, Alfonso Cuaron. And we're going to start by taking a look at their IMDb pages. So let's jump straight into it. The cinematographer for The Prisoner of Azkaban was Michael Seresin. I've always gotten Alfonso Cuaron, Emmanuel Lubezki, and Alejandro Iñárritu a little bit mixed up. I always assumed that Emmanuel Lubezki was involved in this film because he's typically Alfonso Cuaron's go-to cinematographer, but he wasn't. He's known for the Planet of the Apes series as well as Gravity. Gravity was also directed by Alfonso Cuaron, and we can go ahead and jump over to Cuaron's page. Most recently, he did Roma. Gravity was also pretty recently. Children of Men, in which Emmanuel Lubezki did the cinematography, I believe. All right, that took me a while to find here, but yeah, cinematography by Emmanuel Lubezki, who, like I said, I always just assumed was involved with. Oh, hey, kitty. Was involved with Prisoner of Azkaban, but he wasn't in any kind of way. He did The Revenant, Children of Men, Gravity, and Sleepy Hollow. I'm going to jump over to a very old-looking article by the ASC, American Society of Cinematographers. I'm going to pull out some notable quotes that could be important to diving into the cinematography. First off, the production was 180 shooting days for the first unit. There was more for the second unit, and there was a utilization of up to 12 crews at a time, 15 weeks for the model unit. Cuaron brought along his longtime editor, Steven Weisberg, but when his usual cinematographer, Emmanuel Lubezki, was unavailable, he tapped Seresin. I've been a fan of Michael's work for a long time, always liked his reliance on a single light source and the fact he's pretty uncompromising. He doesn't embellish things for the sake of embellishing them. He believes in a certain aesthetic of respecting the sources of light, and I thought that would be an interesting thing for Harry Potter. The lighting is moodier with more shadowing and cross lighting, says Seresin. In the world of Harry Potter, there's no electricity. In the Great Hall, for example, the lighting comes from candles or flambeaux. I'm fairly literal in my interpretation of where light comes from. If I have any strength, it's that I light as naturally as possible. The goal was to be as dramatic as could be without it starting to look like Seven. Seresin also steered away from the strong orange and blue tones established in the Sorcerer's Stone, shifting instead to a more rain-drenched palette. That'll be interesting to dive into, see how the color compares to the blues and the teals that we looked at in the Sorcerer's Stone. And speaking a bit on lens choice, quote, we were on the 14, 18, 21, and 24 millimeter the whole movie, says Seresin. The reason he explains is that where everybody is situated is really important, especially when conjuring up a world of wizards. Quote, in the Great Hall, you might have a close-up of somebody, but you're aware of 200 kids behind them, as well as the Gothic windows, flambeaux, and so on. Anytime you move the camera, which Alfonso really likes to do, you're revealing where you are and what's going on. Employing a multitude of dollies and cranes, as well as Steadicam, Seresin used very few fixed camera shots. Quote, that's true in Alfonso's other films as well. He notes he's a master of it. This article continues for a couple more pages, and I would definitely recommend checking it out. Like I said, it is on the ASC.com's website, and the title, A Wizard Comes of Age. So let's take a look at these images again and take note of how he's developing a naturalistic look. As he mentions, was his goal, using a lot of practicals, using lights that would be naturally motivated. So we can see some interest being developed in the background with these really warm and really dim practicals back here, just lighting up some of this back here. And then you'd have what would be an overhead lamp out here, lighting these guys, keeping everything really natural. Shadows being developed here, kind of raccoon eyes, butterfly light in the middle, probably a lantern up here, and then same thing here. Not only are you getting natural lighting, you're getting kind of a more natural palette and something that isn't as bright and saturated. And you can see what they've done here is they've wet down everything out here to give some of that shine, visual interest along the road, along this right here, along some of these buildings, just to kind of bounce the light off that's naturally appearing here. And then you can see in this image that duller palette that he was talking about before. You look at the vector scope and everything's pulled more down toward these cool colors down here. You just have this one big panel over here. As he mentioned, he did a lot of side lighting for this film to try to emphasize some of that dread that we're starting to develop in this third film. And then the same thing here. You don't really have, even in these stronger shafts of light, like this golden bright hue that you might have in the first two films. What you have now is these duller colors, duller palettes, more just balanced toward plain white. You don't have any kind of shifts in the color here. Cut that off real quick. And even looking at an image like this, we can see the same thing. It's a more desaturated palette that still retains a lot of depth because you're getting these deep blacks mixed with the highlights up here. And if we just look at the waveform, we can see that a lot of it is sitting in darkness, pretty much completely crushed. Everything pulled down really far. The lighting seems to just be coming from these two windows here, with potentially a lot of negative fill pulled in, and yet they're probably shooting something toward him because you can see light hitting here, light hitting his arm here, even though the window is pushed all the way to the back here. So there's probably another window just off to the left, kind of separating him so he's not blending in entirely over there. And then there's some consistency between the first two films and this one in the Great Hall, where you're still getting that really warm and really saturated kind of look, motivated from all these candles, all the flames, which he talked about a little bit in the ASC article. So this retains a lot of the pop. The only difference here is that they're really going crushed on the blacks, which you can see here in the waveform. So it's a lot more punchier than you saw in the first two. And the same thing here, a lot of contrast, a lot of detail down here in the blacks. It's interesting that you have such a dark room with presumably just one motivating source being this open panel up here, and yet they're wrapping a lot of this light around her. So probably really big soft sources just off camera left, which you can kind of see the shine from here. You wouldn't be getting that shine from up here because that's kind of in the background. So probably a really big soft source here, camera left, and then potentially some negative fill all up here in the right. You're getting that naturally just through the curtains, but a really nice way to shape the light naturally through the set design, and then just implementing some really big soft sources to wrap light around her. And then the same thing here where you can see that motivating source is really just coming camera right, and then he's just letting those shadows fall where they will. You can see really dark back in here, so probably some negative fill on frame left to give a little bit more shape, but this window being in the shot really helps to motivate the source because you probably have lights outside this line of windows here, just shooting through here, probably at a very far distance back so that you have the evenness from here up to here. Here's those big windows being the only motivating source, and then everything else is just allowed to fall into darkness. So really crunchier, a little bit more natural than what we saw before. You can see a lot of visual interest being developed here from this really blue cyan look being pushed into here, and then the natural yellows and reds of the Great Hall being developed from the candles, this here, and then the brick. And real quick, before we end the video, I just want to show how far you can go with a couple of really simple adjustments like temperature and tint. I noticed there is a consistency across some of these where they're pushed a little bit to the warm and green side. So if we were to take a look at this image, for example, if I were to flick on and off the tint adjustment, you can see the green of their skin. I'm going to full screen this. This is before. You see some of the green in the skin and along the tablecloth. Hopefully that's going to show up through YouTube. This is before and after. And then the temperature adjustment, here's just temperature. This is before. You can see everything's pushing a little bit to the warm side, and after. And then here's everything. This is before and after, before and after. So it's a little bit warm, a little bit green. And so you can develop a look similar to this with just two very simple adjustments. Here's before. You can see the green on the skin, the green especially on the owl in here, and after. Corrected just a little bit more toward cool, pulling some of that green out with magenta. You can see that consistency. Here's before. You can see once again the green and the warmth. And after, just a little bit more natural. You can see the brick out in here. And before and after, these are almost copy-paste adjustments. So this is consistent across these different looks. And once again, this is not saying one is better than the other. This is just small adjustments to temperature and tint that can kind of push you in the direction that they've developed here. Things like luminance and all of that would have to be dialed in accordingly. But same thing here. You can see the green and the warmth pushed onto these whiter walls especially out into here, and then that correction. These are very small adjustments here. Same thing, a little bit warm and a little bit green. Just to prove this, just the same adjustments here, temperature and tint across all these. Full screen this one is before and after, before and after. So it might be easier to get into this realm than you might think. It's just pushed a little bit toward green, a little bit warm. It's before and after. And that's going to be it for Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban. Really interesting looking at the difference between the first two films and trying to introduce some of that grit starting here. And all of that is reinforced and made so much better by Alfonso Cuaron's directing and the way that he wants the camera to move throughout the scenes. If you haven't seen any kind of behind the scenes footage of this and get to see Alfonso Cuaron directing on set, I would highly recommend checking that out. I'll see if I can leave some links in the description below. Besides that, if you guys enjoyed the video, feel free to drop a comment, drop a like, or subscribe. Thanks for watching and have a good one.